Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Samslow33, and welcome to Mix Up. And today we're talking about what we should have talked about last week, but because of the new set, I had to delay it a week, which is, of course, Rayquaza EX, one of the most powerful cards that we have right now, able to knock out EXs in one hit. It's a very powerful card, and it pairs very well with two great cards in this format. So, without further ado, let's get to one of my favorite cards from Dragon Exalted, Rayquaza EX. Alright, so let's look at Rayquaza EX's stats and see how he fares out. He has 170 HP, 1 with tree cost, both very nice. His first attack, Celestial Roar, for 1 colorless energy. It says discard the top 3 cards of your deck, and if any are energy, you can attach them to Rayquaza EX. So he has built-in energy acceleration, that's really nice. And then his second attack, this one's the big powerful one everyone's been talking about. Dragon Burst for 1 fire and 1 lightning energy. It says discard either all basic fire energy or all basic lightning energy, so no blend energy allowed here. Attach this Pokemon. It says this attack does 60 damage times the number of energy cards you discarded. So yeah, 60 damage. If you can do math remotely well, discarding 3 energies is just enough to knock out an EX with 180 damage. Of course, EV Light can be a problem, but there's always Tool Scrapper for that. So of course this makes Rayquaza EX a very powerful Pokemon. Fire and Lightning are 2 of our best energy accelerations right now. But he has a dragon weakness, and of course this on an EX is very awful. To be able to get knocked out by Garchomp, regular Rayquaza, and have Dragon in 1 hit, I mean, that's awful, man. I thought this card was going to be actually, good, but ugh, this is like almost as bad as Giratina EX. Ugh. Whatever. It's just one more deck we won't have. Oh, wait a second, that's stupid! That's a really stupid thing that people have been saying, that this deck doesn't work, or it's bad, just because of Dragon Weakness. In fact, I've seen people say it's a bad card exclusively just because of the freaking weakness. Come on, people. That's like 3 decks. Garchomp, yes, it's a problem, it's a bad matchup. Whatever. Decks have bad matchups. Hydreigon is very hard to use, and it also uses an EX, which Rayquaza is very good against. Rayquaza regular, it's another problem. But he's not used very often, and he's also $100, so yeah, not the best. 3 Pokemon to deal with him. So yeah, not that big of a problem. Like, really, you can even, the decks that he's good in, you can even tech in cards to take care of them. I mean, like, really, it's not a problem. This is so easy, and people are like, nope, you lose, look it up. I don't know. But anyway, Rayquaza EX is actually a very good card, in my opinion. Of course, I said there's very good energy accelerations with both fire and lightning. Of course, with lightning, we have the big bad Eelektrik, which is able to Dynamotor onto a benched Rayquaza EX, and then you play like Sky or Bridge or Switch or something. You teach that and keep cycling through them. Keep using Dragon Bursts for however many heals you have in play. Of course, it's kind of like Rayquaza EX in that fashion, and that's going to get pretty popular. This, I think, would be the best way to use Rayquaza EX. But there's also, of course, there's Emboar for fire Pokemon. You can attach as many as you want per turn, so you don't have to keep setting up multiple Rayquazas and retreating between them. You can just use one and get a bunch of energy onto that really easy. So yeah, 2 great energy accelerations, and both of them work very well in this deck. So let's take a look at the Eel version of the deck first. Here's a skeletonless deck provided. Now, when I've been testing this, it actually does turn out to be kind of slow. Having to set up 2 Rayquaza EX, both with fire energies, as well as 2 or 3 Electrics, actually does take quite a while, with and without Emolga. So that might be an issue with this deck, but once it does get going, it's actually very powerful. So I don't think that's going to be awful. As long as you can attack fast enough to get in the lead again, you should be fine. But it is definitely a slow deck. Now let's take a look at the list. 3 Rayquaza EX, that's enough that you can be able to use him as many times as you want, and also so you always have 2 in play. Well, at the end you might not have 2 in play, but there's always Super Rod and Revive to get them back. Then for Eelektrik, we have a 3-4 line. I'd recommend the Spark Dynamo over the Thunder Wave 1, 3-1 split probably. Just to soften up Pokemon so you don't have to waste a whole nother energy just to take out Pokemon that would normally be 10 damage away from knockout with 2 energy, or 1 energy, whatever. So I prefer the Spark Dynamo. And regular Rayquaza, I know 2 would be kind of ridiculous since it's worth $100 and it's super rare and all that. But, if you have access to 2 or are willing to get access to 2, it's a very great card. It helps quite a lot in the Garchomp matchup. It can donk both Swablu and Gibble. It's also a very great attacker against Garchomp once it's set up. So Rayquaza, if you have access to 2, I recommend it, but 1 would be fine, or even 0, I say the deck could do without. And for trainers, 4 Catcher, that's obvious. 4 Ultra Ball and 3 Level Ball. For search, I think this should do just fine. Probably won't need much more than that. 3 Switch, just because Eelektrik has higher retreat costs, and a lot of your attackers have higher retreat costs, that I think 3 would be very useful rather than the regular 2, and since Junk Arm's gone, it's harder to get them back. I've noticed that 3 does go by pretty fast, so I'd recommend at least 3 Switch in this deck. Tool Scrapper, this is to get rid of that Eevee-like problem I said, that gets Pokemon out of KO range, but Tool Scrapper gets rid of that Eevee-like and makes everything A-OK. 2 Super just because you don't have Junk Arm again, running a 1-off would be less beneficial, so you can recover Eelektrik quite easy, get a few of them back each game instead of just 1. So Super is a very useful card. It can also help get back some of the energy you discarded, or say if you retreated with the fire energy, or if you used Dragon Burst with fire energy or something, you can get them back with this. So Super is a very nice card, especially in the Eelektrik deck. And for the supporter line, we have 4 Juniper, 4 Anna, 2 Bianca, and 2 Charon. Pretty standard line. And 2 Sky Bridge is, of course, a very helpful card in this deck. Helps you keep retreating the Rayquaza EXs, so you can Dynamite her to 1 and retreat to it. So, yeah, you might want to go up to 3 if you really are having problems with it, but there aren't too many great stadiums out right now, so Sky Bridge should be fine with just 2. Now for the energy, we have 8 Lightning and 6 Fire. I think this is a good amount. I've tried it with less, and it seems that I've gone into a lot of droughts with energy, but I think this should do just fine. You probably won't need too much more energy than this, but it couldn't hurt to try it out. Now let's get on to some techs that we could try out. Basically, any attacker that works in Eelektrik decks should be fine. Zekrom, Bouffalon, Registeel EX, all these cards, Mewtwo EX, whatever. Anything that works in an Eelektrik deck should work just fine in this deck. Preferably not the ones that rely on double Carlos energy, like Regigigas or Bouffalon, as I just said. But most of the ones that use just electric energy should be fine. And the 2 attackers out of those I really like to talk about, the first one is Rayquaza EX. This, of course, is a really great card in this deck just because it works in the same fashion as Rayquaza EX. Is you Dynamiter to it on the bench and then retreat and attack. So, and then they can also help in your Garchomp matchup since you can snipe Altarias. It can help in a lot of matchups to help in the mirror. So Rayquaza EX is definitely very helpful. Zekrom EX is good against those 2 cards that say this deck sucks, which is Garchomp and Hydreigon. Both, of course, are Dragon weak, and they also have 140 and 150 HP, so Zekrom can't do quite enough here. So Zekrom EX, the 150 is definitely a great thing to have. Regigigas EX might also be able to do 150, but it's a lot harder, because, attacking into a Regigigas is ridiculous. One last card I'd like to talk about is Emolga. I don't recommend Emolga in this deck just because the extra energy attachment is actually very helpful. If you waste 1 on Emolga, that's a fire energy or lightning energy that's stuck on Emolga for the rest of the game unless it gets knocked out. So I recommend not including it and just adding more search. If you have, 7 or 8 balls, you should be fine. But I'd rather use the attachment on a Rayquaza EX to use Celestial War turn 1 or whatever. So now let's talk about the matchups of the deck. Against the Darkrai Hydreigon, I think this matchup is about even, maybe a little unfavorable. Even though you are weak to Hydreigon's attack, you can counterattack with Zekrom EX. And also, if they ever decide to use Darkrai EX, just 1 Dragon Burst is enough to take 2 prizes off that, so I don't think this matchup is awful. Just because, first of all, you can KO their EXs, and they can also KO your EX, and you can do it probably a lot easier and more consistently than them. But they may be able to outspeed you if you get to it too slow of a start. But Hydreigon is also a pretty slow deck as well. So there definitely are worse matchups here. Speaking of worst matchup, Garchomp Altaria is probably one of your worst matchups. Of course, since it's all dragon types, they can all one-hit KO you very easily. And of course, you can donk them with Rayquaza, and you can use Zekrom EX as well. But it does render your main attacker completely useless. So it's not as awful as matchup I think people say it is, but it's definitely one of your worst matchups. Against the Eelektrik decks, this is a very good matchup, just because a lot of people have been starting to focus on Rayquaza EX and Mewtwo EX more than stuff like Zekrom and Terrakion that this deck has problems with. And of course, Rayquaza EX and Mewtwo EX are 2 of your best friends when it comes to your opponent using them, because you can just knock them out one hit. And yeah, it can definitely be able to outspeed you and whatnot, but I think this matchup is definitely a pretty nice matchup. Now on to the fighting decks. I'd say Terrakion without EXs, just straight for Terrakion or Terrakion Landis, whatever, this is a pretty bad matchup. Just because, of course, it takes 3 Dragon Burst energy to knock out Terrakion for 1 prize, and they can knock out your Dynamos in 1 hit very easily. This is just a pretty ugly matchup, and you can't really use any backup attackers because those are pretty bad, like your EXs like Zekrom EX and whatnot would get destroyed, and Rayquaza is just not that helpful in this matchup, so this is not the best matchup. But against a Terrakion filled with Terrakion EX and Groudon EX or whatnot, this is a much better matchup, just because, of course, they're using EX Pokemon, and this deck is very good against them since you can knock them out in 1 hit. So this is definitely a much better matchup. But if they're still playing a lot of Terrakion and just like 1 or 2 Terrakion EX, this is still a pretty unfavorable matchup, just because they can just not play down their Terrakion EX. Next one, Entei. This one is one of your best matchups just because they have all EX Pokemon and you can, destroy them 1 hit. There's nothing they have that can get around it, like with Terrakion or whatever. It's just straight 4 EXs. It's 3 easy knockouts, 6 easy prizes. So yeah, this matchup is definitely a very nice matchup indeed. Against speed Darkrai decks or just not Hydreigon Darkrai decks like Darkrai Tornadus and whatnot, this is also a good matchup because, again, all EX deck. But this isn't quite as good as a matchup as Entei because they can still do the sniping eels trick where they KO both at the same time and ruin your setup. But this isn't the best matchup, but this is still a pretty good matchup since you can, still KO their Darkrai's for 1 hit and whatnot, blah, 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 whatever. Said it a million times. Empoleon, I'm not sure about this one. I'd say it's about even, because you still can tech in electric Pokemon to take them out, like Zekrom, but Rayquaza EX is horrible against Empoleon itself, not its backup attackers, but the Pokemon itself. And Terrakion can be a problem for your other electric attackers that are dealing with Empoleon. So this matchup, I'd say it's about 50-50, maybe a little in their favor, but it's definitely not that awful matchup. Isildur with Gothitelle, this matchup is not too great, just because Gothitelle, again, has that 130 HP that Rayquaza EX dreads, and Isildur is also good against EX Pokemon like Rayquaza, so Gothitelle can actually be a problem. But if you start using Dynamo's Spark on the Gothitelles early enough, then you should be able to get them into KO range of Rayquaza EX. Garbodor decks, this is another pretty bad matchup just because you don't really have any counter to Garbodor, since it ruins all your energy acceleration and you can't really build up an attacker fast enough to kill it. But you do have Tool Scrapper, so you should be able to take it out fast enough, but it's still a pretty bad matchup, in my opinion. Against Ninetales and Moongus decks, this matchup is actually a decent one. Regular Rayquaza does just enough damage to knock out both Ninetales and Moongus. It can also donk Foongus, that only has 40 HP. And since you'll be constantly retreating your Rayquaza EXs and whatnot, the special conditions won't hurt that much. The confusion will be basically useless, and the poison will go away pretty soon. However, they still can just straight up outspeed you and disrupt too much with Bright Look. But overall, I think this matchup is definitely in your favor in the end. Alright, so now let's get on to the Emboar version of the deck. Now, this version of the deck focuses more on attaching to one Rayquaza than cycling through many of them and whatnot. But it's still a great deck, and let's talk about it right now. For your Rayquaza EX, of course, good number for EX is your main attacker. The Emboar line I chose is 3-1-3. I think it's bulky enough. It should do you fine for the game. For catcher, that's a pretty obvious one. For item search, I chose 4 Ultra Ball and 1 Level Ball just because I really hate Level Ball. It's not good in decks like this at all. You can only search out Tepigs, and it just seems kind of a waste to me, but there aren't that many Pokemon, so communication isn't that great of an option, and I guess it's a better option than Heavy Ball, at least. 3 Rare Candy, obviously great for any Stage 2 deck. Energy Retrieval is to get back the energy you discard with Rayquaza EX. You just use Energy Retrieval, that's another 120 damage. So Energy Retrieval is definitely necessary in this deck. 3 Switch, because of all your high retreat Pokemon like Emboar, or your 1 high retreat Pokemon like Emboar, who's a problem. Tool Scrapper, same purpose as the last deck, to get rid of EVLites that make it harder to KO, blah blah blah. And for the supporter split, I chose 3 Juniper, 3 Anne, 3 Bianca, and 3 Cheren, just because there isn't really a specific supporter that this deck likes. It's just kinda meh. For energy, I chose 10 Fire and 5 Lightning, just because you don't need to charge up 2 Rayquazas at the same time, so you don't need as many of the secondary energy, but 10 fire, of course, is helpful, so you don't have to recycle through too many. Now let's get on to some text. Reshiram EX, of course, is for the same purpose as Zekrom EX to, get through Garchomp and stuff like that this deck has a problem with. Regular Reshiram for a non-EX attacker for stuff like Bouffalant and Sigilyph and whatnot, because, you have to have one of those. Mewtwo, because, he's Mewtwo. He's good against Mewtwo, it's Mewtwo, blah blah blah, Mewtwo. Mewtwo, 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 Mewtwo. Mewtwo, 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 Mewtwo. Mew. Next is Registeel. This one might seem a little odd, but since you need kind of a magic number to knock out every Pokemon, Registeel could be a nice inclusion. You can use this on a bunch of Pokemon, and then that will make it so that they are just a range of KO of Reshiram EX or Rayquaza EX or whatever. Say you hit the Garchomp in the active and then 2 Gibbles on the bench, and next turn they evolve those into Gabite or Garchomp, whatever, and then you hit the active Garchomp for 1 energy instead of the 2 you normally need. So Registeel could help in getting the Pokemon to that magic amount of damage. Super Scoop Up is another good one. You can pick up a Pokemon if you're lucky enough and then just attach the energy back onto it, unlike with other decks where you have to attach the energy over again or whatever. This one, you super scoop it up, send up something else, hopefully be able to switch it or whatever, bring up another thing, attach the energy back, and start attacking again. So Super Scoop Up, I couldn't find room for it in this. If you can find room for the card, then go right ahead. Now I'm not going to talk about the matchups just because they're pretty similar, except your Empoleon matchup is horrendous now. Now let's get on to the last deck I'd like to talk about, which actually is a very interesting one that I've been hearing a little bit of hype about, and that is Quad Rayquaza EX. Now the idea with this is you run a whole bunch of energy, and then you Celestial Roar to hopefully get 2 or 3 energy to be able to use whatever you want on the next turn. Very powerful. But, of course, Celestial Roar isn't exactly consistent, and also running all those energy means you have to exclude some other great cards, but hey, why don't we take a look at the list I've provided anyway. For Rayquaza EX, that's obvious. 1 Rayquaza just for the donk, as well as to have a non-EX attacker and for Garchomp or whatever. 4 Pokemon Catcher, just because it's such a great card, it's so hard to exclude from this deck. 4 Ultra Ball, just because there aren't any other good cards I can search for Rayquaza EX. 4 Super Rod to get back those energies, it also helps you not deck out. And N, you don't really need a draw supporter that much, but this one's also very disruptive, and it won't disrupt you too much as long as you have an energy in Rayquaza EX. You should be fine, unless you want to hold onto a catch or whatever. And then for the energy, we have 22 Lightning energy and 17 Fire energy. The reason I have more Lightning than Fire is in case you want to use Rayquaza Regular's first attack. It makes it more likely you'll have a Lightning energy in your hand, but obviously you're going to have a Lightning energy in your hand. You have 22 of them. Come on. So yeah, there aren't really any text you can include just because it's a quad deck, and you want to keep it as simple as possible with as many energy as possible and as little other stuff as possible. Maybe something like Switch to get Rayquaza in the active spot to be able to donk, or Sky or Bridge for the same purpose, but I don't think the deck really needs it. So those are all the Rayquaza variants. I definitely think the Eelektrik variant could be playable, but the other 2 probably will never see competitive play just because they're kind of clunky. The Quad Rayquaza one could be a little interesting, but not good, I guess I should say. So, thanks for watching today's episode. Rayquaza EX, there definitely aren't quite a lot of variants, but I think Eelektrik will definitely be the best variant. Emboar, and the Quad variant's just not that good at all. But the Eel variant, I definitely think, will be very popular. I mean, it might not be great, but it'll at least be popular. And I will definitely be testing that deck out. And I've had some decent success. I might try it out for Battle Roads. So, yeah. Remember, there's a tin coming out at the end of September that contains Rayquaza EX, as well as there's one with Mewtwo and Darkrai. So that's going to be very great. And another thing, the World Championship should actually be going on right now. In Hawaii, the last chance qualifier, I believe, already ended. So maybe by the time you're watching this, we might already have our champion of the year. So if something awesome happens or whatever, I might dedicate next episode to that. But if not, next episode will all be about that little guy Garchomp. I teased him a couple episodes ago that he would be in the episode, but nope. We're actually going to talk about him this time. Altaria as well, and Gabite, and Gibble, and Swablu, and maybe Rayquaza again. And yeah. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check in for all the Worlds updates, wherever Worlds updates are. I think it's... This site is PokemonWorldChampionships.com. You can go there and they'll tell you the standings and what's happening and whatnot. So, and remember, I forgot to say this, but actually, they will be recording the final match of the World Championships, or maybe more. I don't know. It says finals, but that could be anything. Hopefully, it'll just it'll be like all the top 32 or whatever. But they'll definitely be recording the final match with commentary. So that's gonna be great. They don't have to get Top Cut to do that for them this time. They can do it by themselves, and that's gonna be really great for the game and all that stuff. So anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. Garchomp Altaria. Later.